now Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House.
Last Tuesday, we observed the anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution on September 17th. Sadly, on that day, the Intelligence Community Inspector General formally notified the Congress that the administration was forbidding him from turning over a whistleblower complaint on Constitution Day. This is a violation of law. Shortly thereafter, press reports began to break of a phone call by the President of the United States calling upon a foreign power to intervene in his election. This is a breach of his constitutional responsibilities. The facts are these. The Intelligence Community Inspector General, who was appointed by President Trump, determined that the complaint is both of urgent concern and credible. And its disclosure, he went on to say, relates to one of the most significant and important of the Director of National Intelligence's responsibility to the American people. On Thursday, the Inspector General testified before the House Intelligence Committee stating that the acting Director of National Intelligence blocked him from disclosing the whistleblower complaint. This is a violation of law. The law is unequivocal. The DNI staff, it says the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, shall provide Congress the full whistleblower complaint. For more than 25 years, I've served on the Intelligence Committee as a member, as the ranking member, as part of the Gang of Four, even before I was in the leadership. I was there when we created the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. That did not exist before 2004. I was there even earlier in the 90s when we wrote the whistleblower laws and continue to write them to improve them to ensure the security of our intelligence and the safety of our whistleblowers. I know what their purpose was, and we proceeded with balance and caution as we wrote the laws. I can say with authority the Trump administration's actions undermine both our national security and our intelligence and our protections of the whistleblowers, more than both. This Thursday, the acting DNI will appear before the House Intelligence Committee. At that time, he must turn over the whistleblower's full complaint to the committee. He will have to choose whether to break the law or honor his responsibility to the Constitution. On the final day of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, when our Constitution was adopted, Americans gathered on the steps of Independence Hall to await the news of the government our founders had crafted. They asked Benjamin Franklin, "What do we have, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin replied, "A republic if you can keep it." Our responsibility is to keep it. Our republic endures because of the wisdom of our Constitution, enshrined in three co-equal branches of government, serving as checks and balances on each other. The actions taken to date by the President have seriously violated the Constitution, especially when the President says, Article 2 says I can do whatever I want. For the past several months, we have been investigating in our committees and litigating in the courts, so the House can gather all the relevant facts and consider whether to exercise its full Article 1 powers, including a constitutional power of the utmost gravity, approval of articles of impeachment. And this week, the President has admitted to asking the President of Ukraine to take actions which would benefit him politically. The actions of the Trump presidency revealed the dishonorable fact of the President's betrayal of his oath of office, betrayal of our national security, and betrayal of the integrity of our elections. Therefore, today, I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry. I'm directing our 6 committees to proceed with their investigations under that umbrella of impeachment inquiry. The President must be held accountable. No one is above the law. Getting back to our founders, in the darkest days of the American Revolution, Thomas Paine wrote, "The times have found us. The times found them to fight for and establish our democracy. The times have found us today. not to place ourselves in the same category of greatness as our founders, but to place us in the urgency of protecting and defending our Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. In the words of Ben Franklin, to keep our republic. I thank our chairman, Chairman Nadler, Chairman Nadler of Judiciary, Chairman Schiff of Intelligence, Chairman Engel of Foreign Affairs, Chairman Cummings of Oversight, and Chairman Cummings I've been in touch with constantly. He's a master of so much, but including inspectors general and whistleblowers. Congresswoman Richie Neal of the Ways and Means Committee, Congresswoman Maxine Waters of the Foreign Financial Services Committee. And I commend all of our members, our colleagues, for their thoughtful approach to all of this, for their careful statements. God bless them, and God bless America. Thank you all.
Madam Speaker, never before has the President been convicted by the Senate. What does this accomplish if the Senate doesn't convict?
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Capitol Hill announcing the formal impeachment inquiry moving forward after questions about a phone call with the Ukrainian leader by President Trump. Noticeably, the Speaker said it was a violation of law with respect to holding back the whistleblower's complaint to Capitol Hill, but she said a breach of constitutional responsibility as far as the president's actions on that phone call. We mentioned earlier President Trump today tweeting that he has authorized the release of the transcript, unredacted, of that phone call with the Ukrainian leader. And he is saying that this is all another witch hunt, according to the president's words. Speaker Pelosi saying that she has activated and asked all of her committee chairs to come forward in this process that now will be a formal impeachment inquiry. Join me here, Martha McCallum, John Roberts on the phone, Britt Hume, and Chris Wallace, who just wrapped up an interview with the Iranian president. More on that in a minute. Martha, your reaction to what the Speaker said?
Well, she zeroed in on calling a foreign power to intervene in a U.S. election. So that is the area where she feels that the president has overstepped his bounds. Obviously, it harkens back to the entire Mueller investigation and the concerns about that as well. She's saying it happened here and it happened in a much more clear way that has a flow through. And as you said, the violation of law from the DNA blocking the whistleblower, which we mentioned before, is not a done deal. There are different interpretations of that, given the responsibilities of the IG and where they lie. There's also the question that has been very obvious, which has to do with whether or not every conversation that the president has with a foreign leader has the right to remain confidential. But she laid out, her committee leaders, the way that, to some extent, the way this process is going to go. We're going to learn more about that as it moves forward. But she has started this ball rolling in no uncertain terms.
Chris Wallace, again, who just wrapped up an interview with the Iranian president. Chris, we are told that the whistleblower wants to testify in front of the House and Senate Intelligence Committee. But your thoughts of what the House Speaker just said and the formal initiation of this inquiry?
Well, I think the most interesting aspect of this is, we're talking a lot about what the whistleblower knew or didn't know, firsthand knowledge. But the fact is that President Trump and his staff have really said quite a lot since Sunday in trying to explain or defend what they did. That puts a lot of meat on the bones. The fact is the president says that in that introductory congratulatory phone call with the president-elect at that time of Ukraine, he did talk about Joe Biden and his son and possible corruption, and expressed some concerns about wanting the Ukrainian president to look into that. We also know, because it was admitted today by Kellyanne Conway, at the story that was on the front page of the Washington Post this morning, which is that the president did ask Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney before he made that call in July to stop the provision of military aid to Ukraine, which had been overwhelmingly passed by Congress. Everyone seemed in the government to want, and the president said he wanted it to be stopped. And so the two parts of the basic story here, that the president wanted Biden investigated and that he had previously stopped aid that had been approved by Congress for Ukraine, that those have been confirmed by the administration. Now, the president denies it was a direct quid pro quo. I'm saying unless you investigate, you won't get that money. The president said today he gave a different answer than he'd given originally. Originally, he'd said it was because I was concerned about corruption. Today, he said it was because some other European countries weren't doing their part. But this is not, it may not bear fruit, but there is, as I say, some meat on the bones here, both in terms of what the president said to the Ukrainian president and the actions that he had taken to stop aid before he made that call. So there's going to be something here for Congress to investigate. Whether it ends up rising to the levels of articles of impeachment, we don't know. And Andy McCarthy, I thought, as usual, made a very good point, saying that just starting a process does not mean that you're necessarily going to end up with impeachment. It's a big story. It'll be the headline of every paper in America tomorrow. Congress, the House, begins a formal impeachment inquiry, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go all. There is, as I say, some meat on the bones here, both in terms of what the president said to the Ukrainian president and the actions that he had taken to stop aid before he made that call. So there's going to be something here for Congress to investigate. Whether it ends up rising to the levels of articles of impeachment, we don't know. And Andy McCarthy, I thought, as usual, made a very good point, saying that just starting a process does not mean that you're necessarily going to end up with impeachment. It's a big story. It'll be the headline of every paper in America tomorrow. Congress, the House, begins a formal impeachment inquiry, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go all the way.
Exactly. Chris, stand by if you would. The president just tweeting moments ago, such an important day at the United Nations, so much work, so much success, and the Democrats purposely had to ruin and demean it with more breaking news, witch hunt garbage, so bad for our country. John Roberts, it's worth noting here that Nancy Pelosi did not schedule a vote with the whole House to authorize an impeachment inquiry. Yeah. She talked about her committee leaders. If she had complete confidence, wouldn't that be the procedure that she'd use to move forward formally?
Well, I think she's gone off the 1 meter board. She hasn't gone off the 3 meter board yet, if you will, in terms of taking a high dive, because again, there's all this that we do not know. And I got a more exact transcript of what the president said with the Iraqi president a short time ago, and we're still awaiting the video from that. But the president said of Nancy Pelosi, she hasn't even seen the phone call. The phone call was perfect, skipping down. But the good news is that voters get it. This is why they say it's good for the election for him. But you know what? It's bad for the country. What she's doing is very bad if it's true, because he didn't know at that point that she was going to go ahead with this. I can't even believe that it's true. How do you do this and you haven't even seen the phone call? And the whistleblower, they say, the president goes on to say, was secondhand or third-hand knowledge. So she's tasked her committee chairs with looking into the impeachment process when we've got two very big holes in this story. What exactly did the president say to President Zelensky of Ukraine? We know some of the reporting about it, but the reporting doesn't have the entire context, and we don't know the complaint.
A lot of this will come out in coming days, and we'll have you covered. I'm Brett Baer in New York. Please stay tuned to Fox News Channel for continuing coverage of this story with the 5, then special report. Come back to Fox for all your news. Joining us now as we continue our coverage here on Fox News Channel, Brit Hume, senior political analyst. Brit, you listened to the speaker. You heard what we've just been saying about the lack of a vote in the full House. Your thoughts on what she said? Brit Hume, Okay, standing by, we've got Martha and John. I think it's interesting to see how Nancy Pelosi, who has been so reluctant to go down this road, has decided that this is the time. And, you know, what specifically changed over the last 24 hours on the data that we know about this call and what the president said.
Well, she claims that it's the two factors that she just pointed to in terms of what tripped the wire. She says this is not politics. She said it several times over the last 24 hours. This is about the Constitution. She seemed at one point, when she was quoting Thomas Paine, to actually get teary as she talked about the importance of this as she sees it constitutionally and moving forward. And going back to what Chris Wallace was talking about in terms of meat on the bones, you do also have, as you mentioned before, Britt, the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and what he has already admitted to in this process and what we know about what his role was. He wanted to go over there initially and made it very clear. I want them to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden and what their relationship was and why they decided to, push to have this prosecutor fired from when Hunter Biden was working on the board of this company. And, then that got recalled. Then he admitted in a very strange interview that he did with Chris Cuomo that he didn't push them to do it. And then subsequently he said, well, of course I did push them to do it. So this has been in the ether for some time, that this has been a desire on the part of President Trump and the desire of Rudy Giuliani to push the envelope here. They want this investigated. They want more people paying attention to the Joe Biden part of the story. And that is the flip side of this. As they move forward, all of this stuff and the details of Burisma and all of this involvement is going to keep coming out. It's going to give both sides fodder for continuing the Joe Biden side of the story as well.
Burisma, the oil company that Hunter Biden was on the board of, owned and operated by a Ukrainian oligarch who was being investigated for money laundering and other things. Mike Emanuel is up on Capitol Hill. We've been talking about the minutia of the process. Mike, it is a formal inquiry now with the announcement of the House Speaker moving forward.
Brett, so what I expect you will see is essentially Nancy Pelosi telling her lieutenants, the committee chairs of those 6 committees, to look into every little facet of relations between the U.S. and Ukraine, what was known about that aid that was promised to Ukraine, how long it was withheld, who made the orders, that sort of thing, to go through every little piece of what is known about this story and what we've yet to learn about this story, and funnel it through the Judiciary Chairman, Gerald Nadler, and ultimately then Nadler and Speaker Pelosi and the top lieutenants will have a conversation about whether it's enough to go forward on the House floor with what they consider high crimes and impeachable offenses. So essentially some folks have analyzed this as Nancy Pelosi's having it both ways still. Basically, all these committees were investigating all things President Trump and his administration up until now. Now she's calling it a formal impeachment inquiry, so she gets the left base off her back a bit by saying, okay, I launched it, but for those swing districts that gave them the majority in 2018 that were formerly Republican districts, she's not putting a gun to their head saying you have to go to the floor and vote impeach or not. And so it's an investigation. It continues as it has for months here on Capitol Hill, with all these committees trying to dig into all things of the president's administration, his finances, etc. This time it'll be about the situation with his conversations with the Ukrainian leader and to see whether it goes forward to impeachment on the floor. But it sounds like she's buying herself months after she was facing including freshman Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who blasted her leadership on Saturday night on Twitter, saying the shame of this is not what President Trump has done, but it's that Democratic leaders have not impeached him for it. And here we are a few days later, and she says, okay, fine, formal impeachment inquiry. Brett?
Right, Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, stand by. One of those Democrats, New Jersey Representative Jeff Van Drew, worries publicly that impeachment could, quote, harm the country. He is one of the most conservative Democrats. He was elected in a swing district last year, and that is what you're going to see happen. Reporters up on Capitol Hill asking different members on the Democratic side what they think specifically of the launch of this formal impeachment inquiry. Joining us on the phone, I think we have him, senior political analyst Britt Hume. Your thoughts, Britt?
Well, there is some backfire potential in all this, because it's possible that when the transcript comes out and whatever else information comes out, it will appear to be much ado about not very much. I just can't, as I mentioned to you earlier, Brett, I can't imagine the president being willing to put out this transcript if it were incriminating. So it seems to me that that when all is said and done, if people look at this and said, my Lord, these people can't stop trying to impeach. They wanted to impeach the president over Russia and collusion. Then they wanted to impeach Brett Kavanaugh. Now they're trying to impeach the president again over something else that turns out to be not very much. So this is kind of the scenario that one thinks that Nancy Pelosi's been worried about all along, and you sense here that, you know, the pressure from within her caucus became so great that when this came along, she couldn't hold it back anymore, because there are indeed risks, which is not to say, Brett, that when all is said and done, we won't look at this and say the president had no business trying to pressure a foreign leader into conducting some kind of an investigation that could have implicated his political opponent and therefore helped him politically. So those are the two possibilities, but they seem to be not clearly clear on either side as to how this is going to turn out.
Yeah, that's the other part of the equation, Britt, that we don't know. The Ukrainian president, even though he did an interview with Voice of America, wasn't asked what was the back end of that phone call. So we don't know that side of it either.
Right.
To Chris Wallace's point earlier, what about the possibility that Nancy, and Andy McCarthy as well, that Nancy Pelosi lets out some steam here in her caucus, announces this formal inquiry, figures out that they don't have the articles of impeachment to move forward, but they go down the investigation, and that's really what this is about?
Well, I think that's right, and there's a lot here in the sense that the Democrats look at this, Brett, and they say, look, what the president has already admitted to is good enough for us. He's already said that, you know, he's on the phone with the guy and he encouraged this investigation into corruption, and at the time he'd been withholding this money, and then after that he released it and so on. So all of that is, you know, it creates a scenario, a set of facts. But you if you look on the other side of the equation, you have something quite similar. Joe Biden goes over to Ukraine. He's got this money that's been held back. He says they'll never get it unless they fire a prosecutor. The prosecutor gets fired. The money is then released. The vice president's son is implicated in the prosecution, however directly or indirectly that may be, and that looks bad. So obviously what's required here is more facts on all sides, and what's also likely is that as we get more facts on the Trump-Ukraine side of it, we're going to get more facts on the Biden-Ukraine side of it.
All right, Britt, stand by if you would. Joining us again, former Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, Andy McCarthy. Andy, to your point earlier, this is different. This is an impeachment inquiry. It is not impeachment proceedings. It is not a formal vote in the House to move forward and authorize impeachment. Impeachment is a political process, but it's not even to that voting part of impeachment.
That's right, Brett. It's really not even different from what Jerry Nadler has been saying up until now that he's been doing. I just really don't see, other than having the Speaker of the House, and that's portentous, take a podium and say we're now doing an impeachment inquiry. I just really don't see how this is different than the situation we had half an hour ago before she began to speak. The standing committees are pursuing various aspects of what they regard as a potential impeachment case. The head of the Judiciary Committee has said that he's doing an impeachment inquiry. And when Speaker Pelosi spoke today, as you've pointed out, she's not putting this to a vote. She conveys, at least to those of us who have been watching and have speculated, that she doesn't want to put the 41 or so Democrats who are in Trump-favored districts, she doesn't want to put them to the difficult votes of impeachment. That doesn't seem to have changed either. So basically, she took the podium and she said, we're now formally doing what, if you were listening to Jerry Nadler, you already thought they were formally doing. I just don't see how it's different.
What about, Andy, the call itself? We're going to get the transcript, according to the president, tomorrow, unredacted. What about the possibility, if there was this holding of the $250 million of lethal aid to Ukraine and the conversation about Joe Biden and investigation of he and his son?
Yeah, well, I think you can do abusive things as president and not necessarily be impeachable. I mean, obviously, I think Gerald Ford said in 1970, an impeachable offense is anything the House of Representatives decides is an impeachable offense at a moment in history. So, you know, if they had the votes, you could make anything into an impeachable offense. But in terms of whether you really have high crimes and misdemeanors, I think we all used to know before Trump was president that presidents can do things that are outside the bounds of what they ought to do and still fall well short of committing impeachable offenses. And that it seems to me that unless they can show that, and this is even beyond, I think, beyond that, but if they could show that Trump said to the Ukrainian president, if you don't open an investigation of Biden, you are not getting the $391 million, then you might have something. But if he had done that, as Britt just said, I can't imagine that he'd be releasing the transcript.
Exactly. Andy, stand by as you're looking live on the Senate floor. John Cornyn speaking, the senator from Texas. Since we've been talking Pelosi, Nadler, Schiff, and of course Maxine Waters, can you believe this? And then tweeting presidential harassment. Let's get some thoughts from Dana Perino and Juan Williams of The Five. I've been listening to all of this. Dana, then Juan. Go ahead.
Well, we are, we're champing at the bit here at The Five to get on and talk about it. But what I was thinking when Ann McCarthy just said that this is no different after Pelosi's statement than what we had earlier today. Now they're going to think about an inquiry to maybe think about doing an inquiry. And it goes on and on and on. And it takes longer than an American Idol contestant reveal as to who is the winner. And I think that right now, when you have just about in a moment, you'll have Congressman Scalise and Minority Leader McCarthy come out, and they're going to figure out a way to try to get Republicans to unify behind this. And they're going to be able to say, look, President Trump's already said he's going to release a transcript. We're going to get it tomorrow. Why do we have to go down this road? But then on the Democrat side, they want to just figure out a way to keep dribbling this out, and that the media will drop everything, do wall-to-wall coverage every single time they take a baby step towards impeachment, means that they're not able to talk about anything either. I think about how Nancy Pelosi has wanted to tap the brakes on this for months. She does not want to go down this road because she knows the politics will be very bad for them. But also, Brett, this is very interesting. 16 of the 31 congresspeople that won in Trump districts, that are Democrats, that won in Trump districts, now they are for impeachment. So I think that she saw the writing on the wall. She had to be for what's going to happen, but she couldn't quite get there today.
Juan, your thoughts?
Well, I think that's the case that the dam broke, so I just want to pick up on what Dana was talking about. I think you saw the piece in the Washington Post where you had moderate Democrats, people from districts where President Trump won handily in 2016, coming around and saying, you know what, it's reached the point where we feel we have no choice. I was particularly taken by the statement by Elisa Slotkin, a Democrat from Michigan, a +7 Trump district, Brett, and she said at this point she doesn't see that there is an alternative. So what we know about Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, is that she keeps a very tight rein on her caucus. And at this point, we know that more than 2/3 of the Democrats in that House caucus say openly they favor impeachment.
One of those Democrats is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Gets a lot of attention up on Capitol Hill. New York obviously gets a lot of attention on the left side of her party, and one of the people pushing Nancy Pelosi to make this formal inquiry announcement today. Let's talk with Fox News contributor, former South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, joins us on the phone. Congressman, your thoughts on this move and what it really portends?
Brett, I think impeachment's a third legal, a third political, and a third communications. And Speaker Pelosi's press conference today was pure communications. It's to tap down the base. They want the president impeached. Heck, Brett, 70 Democrats voted to impeach the president before the first word of the Mueller report was made public. So legally, they've been investigating President Trump since they took over in January. So that doesn't change. From a political context, she still is going to have to deal with the base. You just heard the Congresswoman from New York wants to impeach him over the emoluments clause. I can't wait to hear the opening statement in front of the American people about the emoluments clause. So I don't think this is going to placate her base, but that's what she was trying to do.
Right. They're not moving forward with a vote. There is not a House vote to authorize an impeachment inquiry. However, it is seeming to have shifted in the Democratic caucus to get to this point. What about the whistleblower and the Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, saying that it was against the law for the whistleblower's complaint not to be up on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, Brad, I paid really close attention to that. I mean, this can't be because of the content of the phone call, because nobody knows the content of the phone call. So she referenced the statute. The statute does say shall, but there are lots of statutes that say shall, including, Brett, the contempt of Congress statute says shall. The U.S. attorney shall prosecute if Congress holds someone in contempt, but they never do. Statutes just don't say if you feel like it. They say shall and must. That's not a great legal argument. And then the third argument, which is a little bit better, is the failure to produce documents, period, to Congress as a co-equal branch. You know, look, Brett, in the interest of fairness, there were Republicans that wanted to impeach Rod Rosenstein and John Koskinen for failing to produce documents to Congress. I thought it was a wildly crazy idea then. I think if you're going to begin to impeach presidents who may have a privilege or some other legal reason for not producing documents, if that's now an impeachable offense, then every president for the rest of my lifetime needs to be on impeachment watch.
What is your thought of the underlining issue about the Bidens and Ukraine that the president keeps on coming back to? Obviously, the focus is this phone call and what he said or didn't say to the Ukrainian leader, but he continues to tweet and talk about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and what happened in the prosecutor that was let go in Ukraine.
You know, Brett, one of the reasons I like you so much is I perceive you to be a fair person. And I think your viewers that also consider themselves to be fair people think if you're going to investigate part of a fact pattern, you should investigate all of the fact pattern. Two wrongs don't make a right. So if what Biden did was wrong, and I'm not prejudging the content of the phone call, but hypothetically, if what the president said was wrong, two wrongs don't make it okay. But what's also not okay is to engage in duplicity and say, because you're a political enemy, we're going to investigate this fact pattern. Because you're a political friend, we're not going to. I hope all of my fellow citizens, regardless of their political orthodoxy, will reject relativism, because that will really be the demise of our republic.
Trey Gowdy, thanks for the time. Former congressman from South Carolina. Chris Wallace, again, just wrapping up this interview with the Iranian president. Chris, you've been listening to what we've been saying, some of the response. Thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because we have done this interview 20 minutes with the Iranian president, Hassan Rouhani. That's why we were all in New York in the first place, because the president and the United Nations General Assembly are meeting here. It is basically tied up New York with all of the world leaders. I was in the lobby today of the hotel where we did the interview, and suddenly the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe walked by. So it's quite a scene, but that, in terms of at least of the American public and American attention, has all been swept away by the extraordinary developments today. I think that what Andy McCarthy says really stands, that when you look at it, yes, it was pretty dramatic to hear Nancy Pelosi for the first time talk about a formal impeachment inquiry. But in the end, what does that mean? It means that all of the committees that were investigating the president are going to continue to investigate the president. And really what we have to wait for, and much more important and substantive than that, are tomorrow when the transcript is released. We know the president. He has said himself that he talked to the president-elect then of Ukraine about Joe Biden. Let's find out how many times he pressed him to investigate Joe Biden, how much pressure was put on it. We also obviously are waiting to hear from the Director of National Intelligence and the Inspector General. They're going to testify on Thursday before Congress. I think it's inevitable that the whistleblower is going to testify. His lawyer is already in touch with the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. So we're going to know pretty quickly whether there's any there or not. There still may be a huge debate as to whether or not it rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors, which in effect is whatever the House House thinks it means, but whether there's a plausible case to be made for impeaching the president. What just as striking to me is the degree to which for 2 years during the Mueller investigation, all of this was kind of kept under wraps, and in the last week that it is all really kind of blown away. And the other point I guess I want to make is, look at the history of this. Robert Mueller testified on July 24th, and I think by most people's accounts, it was a very disappointing appearance by Robert Mueller, and certainly took a lot of the wind out of any of the impeachment sales, any of the idea of going after this president. And it was on July 25th, the very next day, that President Trump, who basically was free and clear from any movement by Congress, called the Ukrainian president-elect and made this phone call, and now we're in a whole new mess. And you just kind of wonder, why didn't the president, if he was going to press for an investigation, why didn't he have somebody else like Rudy Giuliani do it? Why did he get on the phone and do it himself?
Well,
Cheryl, who's one of the moderate Democrats who changed her mind on this last night, was asked just a moment ago, and she acknowledged, yes, it could hurt her in her district with Trump voters, but she says that she believes that they will understand and that a line was crossed. So, you know, that's the beginning of the argument for these members who are trying to hold on to their districts, where people may be frustrated by this effort that, as Chris says, has been going on for over 2 years.
The Trump campaign weighing in with its own statement, John?
Yeah, they think that this is going to be good for them. Brad Parscale, the campaign manager, emailing me a short time ago. And this is the statement. Democrats can't beat President Trump on his policies or his stellar record of accomplishments, so they're trying to turn a Joe Biden scandal into a Trump problem. The misguided Democrat impeachment strategy is meant to appease their rabid, extreme leftist base. Of course, this is the way that they're trying to paint the Democratic Party, but will only serve to embolden and energize President Trump's supporters and create a landslide victory for the president. A couple of things to watch tomorrow, and this is sort of the height of irony. Tomorrow afternoon, President Trump meets with Vladimir Zelensky at the United Nations.
The Ukrainian leader.
The Ukrainian president, the guy with which he had the phone call. And I expect that they'll probably release the transcript prior to that meeting.
We're hoping somebody in the pool, not VOA, asks the Ukrainian president about that end of the phone call.
And then the president has a press conference right afterwards. And in terms of where we go from here, Rudy Giuliani tweeted earlier today that today was all about Iran, but tomorrow they're getting set to unload a whole bunch more evidence. It would be written and video evidence about Joe and Hunter Biden. So the battle's on.
Yeah, let's join Dana Perino and Juan Williams, and we have intruded in the five. But Dana, let's just talk politics for a second. Meantime, we see new polls in Iowa and New Hampshire that Elizabeth Warren has overtaken Joe Biden. How does this, do you think, factor politically for the former vice president?
I think it's super interesting also because Bernie Sanders, who is not getting a lot of attention lately because he is going down in the polls, but he has a steady base of support. He was asked today, do you think that this hurts Joe Biden? And he declines to answer. He says, I'll let you make that determination. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how it plays out with Elizabeth Warren on the rise. But all of them defending Biden in a way, and also basically turning all of their firepower against President Trump. Who will be the Democrat on the 2020 side that decides it's their turn to take a shot? You have lots of other Democrats, not just Elizabeth Warren. She is not the anointed nominee right now. She is on the rise. Is there anybody else within that area or in that race that would be willing to take him on this? We'll see if that happens. The other thing is just on politics. You are about to see the impeachment turf war on the Democratic side, and it will go on, and there will be leaks about each other, and because you're going to see who's going to get it. Is it going to be Nadler? Will it be Schiff? Who's going to get on the special committee? Is there going to be a special committee? And one of the things that this does for Democrats, it completely clouds their ability to talk about anything else legislatively. They are now going to talk about impeachment and not trade, like, for example, passing the new NAFTA USMCA. That's on the table. Their constituents really need and want that. That's not a partisan issue. They need to get that done. They would like to do something on gun control. They might have been able to do something with the president there. What are they going to be able to campaign on to say that it was worth putting them in power and maybe enough of the Democrats out there in the country will say, well, you know, impeaching the president is important enough for me to turn out again to vote for you. But this is high stakes.